Good afternoon / morning / evening / all the time. It's the internet. So thanks and welcome. You are listening to Recruiting EQ episode number 67. I am incredulous every week that we're at episode whatever, but that has not changed. It's 67 seems like a very big number. This is our fourth success and wellness panel ever, monthly panel. And so far, so good. This one is titled Employee versus Individual Contributor. I just wrote IC on LinkedIn. So if you're just kind of like, what is he talking about? I mean, individual contributor, safety versus autonomy. I have a kick-ass panel. We can swear on this, right? It's my show. We can swear on it. We have a kick-ass panel of people from both staffing and marketing this time. So we're switching it up 2 and 2. I'm very excited to have you guys all here. Why don't we go around the quote-unquote room and introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do for our lovely listeners. And let's start with Emily.
Okay, wonderful. So, hi, everyone. I'm Emily Martinez, and I am the SVP of Client Services and Strategy for WorkGenius. So, my role is to directly partner and work with our clients and ensure that we are meeting the standards and providing the utmost positive experience for them, and then working internally with our recruitment team. I've been in this, I would say, industry now for probably almost 20 years now, so 15 or plus. I don't want to age myself, but that would probably be the core and the crutch of my experience and my background.
Thanks, Emily. You guys are also AI backed, which I'm going to bring up because it may come up as well, that you have your own AI app in addition to recruitment. Am I wrong?
That is correct. Yes. Yes, we can definitely dive into that.
Yeah, exactly. Always good to just let people know because it's the hot topic.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Hot topic du jour. Cool. Who wants to go next?
Sorry, Nick, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Nick Rapley. I am a lifelong entrepreneur. I was on this podcast, I don't know how many weeks, 3 or 4 weeks ago, Rick, talking about life as an entrepreneur and business owner. So I've run businesses my whole life. My main business is RBW Consulting that I set up in 2007 when I was in my early 20s, and currently sit on the board of that company, providing strategic advice, and a couple other little businesses that are kind of in the background that I'm working on launching and scaling.
Thanks, Nick.
And I can jump in there. So my name is Jonathan, and so I'm currently leading consulting management with my own boutique firm. We've just sort of started to grow that, and as I've transitioned out of a role recently, I've previously served as the director of marketing and strategy within the real estate industry. And for about 10 years or so before that, I've been trying to grow up the tree of marketing and get a footing and understand the industry.
Real estate in Toronto, no less, which is for anybody who looks at real estate, bonkers, just bonkers.
Toronto. I bet as competitive as it gets.
Yeah. It's an international podcast, so I thought I'd point out, that when we're talking real estate, you're talking Toronto real estate, which is just bonkers. Thanks, Jonathan.
All around the board. My name's Elaine. I am a marketing generalist. I started out in graphic design. I've been in the industry for about 20 years. I've done both in-house marketing and freelance. Most recently, I've been working as a marketing director in the tech startup industry. And right now, I am taking a summer break from the workforce, and I'm trying to figure out what my next move is for the fall.
Fantastic. And you know what, Elaine? It was actually predominantly your and my conversation prior to this where I chose the independent contributor versus or independent contractor versus employee kind of topic, because it's something that comes up often. We talked about it as well. And I think it's an interesting kind of crossroads right now in the job market. Certainly, the audience for this show is people largely in the UK, Canada, and the US. And often I find myself in conversations with people at all levels of the employee chain or even business owners have at some points contemplated something. You know what? I've been a business owner for a long time. I'm considering becoming an employee in another shop before, or vice versa. You know what? I never thought business ownership was going to be for me, or being an independent contractor was going to be for me. But blah, it just feels like all the change that has happened has pushed people to ask those questions. And I feel like there's maybe something bigger going on there, right? Like it's often either flexibility or work-life balance, or not feeling like a sense of impact or accomplishment in your role, or again, economic instability. Some people have had businesses that were brick and mortar, and then of course COVID happened, and then now they're never going back to brick and mortar again. So like I know it's a massive topic, but this is a 6-hour podcast. You guys know that, right? It's a 1-hour podcast, but I mean, like, how are you all feeling about it? Who wants to sort of maybe kick it off? But my view is that it's a pretty hot topic.
So for me, I recently went through a layoff in November, and I'm not the only one. Like probably half the people I know at this point have had layoffs in their companies, or they've also experienced a layoff. So this whole idea that I used to have of being like, okay, you know what, I'm going to stop the freelancing thing because I want some stability. I want to know where my paycheck is coming from. I want a little safety. Like that I feel like that just doesn't exist anymore. And that's what got me into thinking, it's like, maybe I want to start my own business, because if I don't have that safety there, then like what's stopping me?
Mm-hmm. And especially too, if I may, I think there's a real issue in even when the time comes that you start looking and saying, hey, I'm ready to transition into something that's got that stability. The space seems, especially this last year, seems so competitive that to try and have that piece where you stand out and have that differentiation. I mean, every one of us has unique skills, but it's just for whatever reason, getting to the top of that pile is a real competition.
For sure. Mm-hmm. And how are you? Emily, you're in staffing, so obviously there's two sides to the coin here, and it's Nick or you as well. But I'm curious, Emily, how you feel. You're in the New York market, but nationally as well. It's two-sided, right? There's what you see on your end and speaking to people like yourself, but then also your clients and candidates. How is that landing in the New York or in the U.S. market for you right now?
Yeah, so I think being within the staffing industry, I see both sides daily, right? So, trying to help both, our clients as well as the candidates make informed choices, right? So, regardless of whether or not it's from a stability standpoint, because I think being a full-time employee provides that, right? So you have, a clear path forward, what that safety net is, and you have that structure. But on the flip, the autonomy and, is power, right? So for, the freedom to be able to choose projects and to control schedules and to find their own path is incredibly motivating. So I think, the market is what it is right now. So I think our the clients as a whole are looking to almost try before you buy, right? So they want to make sure they're going to hire and bring on the best talent possible. So that becomes an ongoing conversation with our clients as far as like, what is the priority? What are you really looking for? And what is the biggest impact that you feel like this person could have? And then we obviously have to strategize and work around what that looks like. But for the most part, I would say that like the contingent workforce as a whole has just, I would say, double, twofold, just for the mere fact that there is a need for consistent help, but the concern of making that commitment.
Yeah, for sure. Nick, how are you feeling about it from a staffing sort of perspective, or just a personal perspective?
I think you can answer the question in two ways. There's the needs must way, like people need to do what they need to do to find work, and in a market that is so tough, I think people are now considering all options. And to your point, Elaine, yes, there's more security in permanent work, but that doesn't mean it's always secure, as you've found out. But I think part B of the question is, when you have the choice, what do you choose? And I think I said this before we came on, I think it's a really personal question. And having recruited for clients for 20 years and recruited into our business for the same amount of time, there are people that are just really interested by the the purpose that comes with being at a business for a duration. Being with a company for a number of years feels like you're on that journey. Other people really like the variety. They like project-based work, 6 months at one company, 6 months at another company. You get to meet lots of different people. You get to meet lots of different leaders. So it really is a personal choice. And I think what's going on at the moment is it's giving people the opportunity, possibly through forced situations, to really try different paths and try different avenues and see what fits. Because I think, last point I would say, I think historically, certainly through my early employment years, you should be employed. You weren't pushed to go down the contract route. It was find a job, be secure, do well for the company, and the kind of variety piece was never really an option.
Yeah, for sure. It has changed though, right? And again, I should have mentioned this before. I usually do a little disclaimer on the comments. So this is going live on multiple platforms, right? And so people will comment. And when we have a lull like this one, for a moment, I will grab a comment or so to read. So please do feel free to comment, everybody who's listening to this live. Just know that we are not on the platform you're on. So sidebar comments will not work. We won't see them necessarily. But we had someone who chimed in, a couple of hellos, but then someone who chimed in saying, they remember balking at the idea of being their own boss in the past, but then several years ago, but now it's not so scary anymore. I hear that a lot. Why do you guys think that is? Is it just that post-COVID, everybody was working remotely? You figure like, hey, I don't need to have an office to be taken seriously anymore. Is it what's the popularity in your minds?
Yeah, I think the COVID changed everything. Certainly from a tech perspective. I think people suddenly realized that they could set themselves up, certainly in my industry, quite quickly. And again, I think, big philosophical question. The question goes beyond, can you do it on your own? It's, do you want to do it on your own?
Yeah.
And all of the stuff that comes with being sat in your spare room, just bashing out work all day long, and you perhaps don't have the interaction that you would have in a larger organization. That's the consideration, not can you, because the answer is obviously yes.
For me, it's like I feel like I just know a lot more people who are doing it right now.
Right.
Just more than there was, I would say, like 15 years ago even. And the people I know who are doing it they're happy.
That helps, right? That
they don't have that thing where they're just like, oh my God, what a day. They're very much like, oh yeah, like I'm going to do a few hours of work tomorrow and then I'm just going to hit the beach. Sounds kind of nice.
And are they hiring?
Well, I hope so. But, most of these people, they're all like individual, like they're contractors, they're waiters, they're designers. I'd hope to be one of them. Sounds great.
I think, if I may, one of the things that I've consistently seen amongst certainly friends and some of my peers has always been that sort of that transition period within the sort of work from home, don't work from home, kind of gave everybody that experience to figure out what their own tolerance for independence was. And I think at the same time, because of increased competition or increased turnover, whatever the case may be, as businesses have risen and fallen, there seems to be a lot of people who've gotten this idea, great for it, that you are, if you're the CEO of your own career trajectory, it would seem fit that also, you're much more choosy and selective than about what the roles are that you're going after and how you're going to approach them. I think that's been a really big change that I've seen, certainly.
Yeah. I think that we had a whole episode about this a little while ago, talking about impact. That's one of the main things I hear from people in terms of wanting to make a career change, period, is that they don't feel like they are making enough impact. And I talk to people who are working in recruiting agencies and they think that going internal is going to give them more impact. And I've, advised them that it may be in the past, but now, hell no. Because with the way the market has evolved, sure, there are rarities where people are really happy in their work, but in-house recruiting has become really stressful, and the expectations have risen and salaries have gone down and there's no commission and you're working long hours. So again, we get into the idea that it's like impact has taken on this funny term for, I feel like my boss just asks me to work and I don't see the result. I don't feel accomplished when I'm done the work. There's always just more work for me to do afterwards. My reward for doing good work is more work, and there's no end to it. It's just this endless thing. which is, in my opinion, kind of a confusing of, your job not being rewarding with having impacts, because maybe you do have a big impact. You're just being removed from it, right? You don't feel like, yay. Is the only way to get impact to go on your own though? Like, do you guys feel like this is just like a poor culture problem maybe in employed roles?
I'd like to know from the recruiters, have they found a shift in company culture from the people that from their clients, right? Like, is there a different attitude that hirers have about the people that they want to hire? Like, are they really thinking about work-life balance beyond, saying you can do it, but actually thinking like, no, we really want to build up these people as people. We want to grow a community within our company? Or is it just like, we need people to do a job and we don't care who they are, or, well, we don't care what their lives are like outside of what they can do for me?
I would say, from my experience and the conversations that I just had a conversation probably 15 minutes before this podcast, and one of the things that she had mentioned was the need and the want to have somebody work every single day, but and this is for retail, but they'd be working basically Monday through Sunday, and it was from like an 8:30 a.m. shift until 11, and it would be during peak holiday time. So obviously the need to have that support, and she made a point of emphasizing that they really need someone who's going to be committed. They really wanted to make sure they're going to make the right hire for somebody who understands what they're looking for. And I use that example just for the mere fact that there are clients who need to have a butt in the seat, right? And then there's clients who need to and want to have employees and freelancers that are actually going to, I guess, like, see the long haul with them, right? Like, they see the trajectory of like what this role could possibly be, and who want to grow, right? And so I think it's a client decision, but I guess think it's a role, right? So not every position requires that level of dedication and that level of commitment, but then there's these positions that require that. So I think it's twofold, right? So I think there's clients who want that, but then the position has to also require that.
I think it's really easy to say that the work-life balance, half a day on the beach, half a day working, do what you want when you want, that's the best option. I think there are hundreds, thousands of companies where they really do look after their staff and there is true purpose. And if you went and interviewed those people, they'd say, I would never consider doing it on my own because I love it here so much. And there's so much to be gained from being part of something that is bigger than just you sat in your spare room, relationships that you build and skills that you learn from other people and leaders that you work under that help develop you. One of my personal failings was I think I got into business too early and I didn't stay in the corporate world long enough and learn how it all works and build relationships and learn what great leaders are and what poor leaders are. And it's just, again, I said this in the last podcast, I think it's kind of trendy now to say I'm going to go do my own thing.
Totally.
Without really looking at what you're missing. There's so many intangibles that come from being sat in a room with 20 really smart social people. All of that learning can be lost really quickly if you just say, I can go and do this from my spare room. Well, yeah, you can, but what are you losing? So I think there should be more people promoting life in a company that treats their people really well, because there's so much to be gained.
I feel like your decision, Nick, and this is just like a weirdly personal comment, I guess, but your decision to leave the corporate world early is also possibly where all that positivity comes from. But I will say though that I think that I myself stayed in it way too long. I think before, because I had a bad experience with entrepreneurship very young, or a bad experience. It was a great, like, I thought it wasn't for me, right? I decided to just be a musical artist instead of a record label owner, because it was ruining music for me, and the label side of it. And we did okay, but we did better just as artists than we did as label people, right? But then, so I stayed in the corporate world for a long time until I found recruitment and actually started to enjoy it. But I think that I will say this, though, a lot of the disappointments, the failures, the having to deal with difficult situations, the having to deal with bosses who aren't maybe the best leaders, some who are, some who aren't, and whatever else, also has made me much better as a result. So I think some of even the negative stuff is super valuable too.
Couldn't agree more. And you can't replicate that stuff.
Yeah,
being on your own, you just can't. The bad stuff that you really want to avoid in future, you need to experience it firsthand. There's no other way to learn, and all that's important as well.
Yep, for sure, 100%. So there you go. You hear it. You heard it here first, everybody. If you're miserable right now where you are, just hang on, man.
I think the last thing I'd add is I think it really sharpens things up when you're in those situations, and the answer isn't just go do it yourself. The answer might be just go to a company that you love and you really buy into, and you get the warm fuzzy feeling when you meet the founders or the leaders. Don't just sit in it and hope for the best. Make a change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. There's something that came up in the prior success and wellness panels too, which I'd like to float here because I feel like it's a good segue at this point, which is that there's the talk of work-life balance sometimes is from employers is a negative thing, right? They'll say, oh, and this often is aimed at younger people in general, in the parlance of what I hear all the time. It's like, oh, younger people don't want to work. They don't have any resilience, like they, and so on and so forth. And I don't know that that's necessarily true, but certainly there's a stigma of a lot of young people not having the same kind of work ethic. And there's a myriad reasons that's the perception that we could get into afterward. But certainly one thing that I do realize that I do notice that I think is highly problematic and want to bring up is use of wellness terminology to excuse what is really just avoidance, right? So it's one thing to get something done and accomplish it and be happy about it and then go to the beach for the rest of the day. It's another thing to be like, screw it, this is frustrating me. I'm going to go to the rest of the beach to the beach for the rest of the day because I'm going to avoid doing the frustrating thing. And the very big difference there is one of them is rest, which promotes growth. Like if you have a killer workout, you need to rest in order to heal and build muscle, right? But the other one is avoidance. It's I've come up on something, and rather than push through and solve it, I am going to use the parlance of my time, saying that I need this wellness time. It's mental health time because I was frustrated. Thus, my mental health is in jeopardy. But you're robbing yourself of all of the growth. You stay in stasis if you're constantly finding reasons to avoid. Is this something that you guys are seeing as well that's kind of like out there in prevalence?
I mean, I would say certainly from within the real estate industry, especially because it's an industry that has a lot of high turnover, and it's a low barrier to entry. So you get a lot of young people that come in with this ideal, and I think one of the things that happen regularly is you'll see people who will get frustrated with whatever's going on, as you mentioned, and they'll say, I need to take that time, but it's because they haven't had the opportunity or put in sort of the base work. And I don't want to sound too old-fashioned in this, but they haven't put in the base work to know what the tolerance for frustration is before you can say, hey, here's when I can throw up my hands and say, I need to get a break from this. So I think when it comes to something like that, it's definitely a learned skill on knowing when to balance it. But at the same time, it definitely seems as though there is a push for an understanding that mental health wellness is at least an important piece. So, I mean, I'd say, on the whole, it seems like it's a bit of a win, but it's definitely a learned skill like many other things, I think.
I would say that for myself, excuse me, I'm like losing my voice, but, I think that work-life balance as a whole is a term that has been just thrown around, right? And I think it means something different to every single person, right? And honestly, I think it changes depending on the season that you're in. And, for myself, I have two young kids, a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. And, trying to divide, hours between work and home. And I think just it's about integration, right? And it's and being present where I need to be, right? So and when I'm there. So and some days, honestly, it leans more work heavy, and then there's other days where I think that like life takes the front seat, and the balance comes from the ability, I think, to shift and when needed without that guilt, and that comes from, in my opinion, just good management, right? When you work with and are managed by people who understand that life happens, you have the ability to lean on that and say like, look, I have this to address. But then unfortunately there's people that work in environments where that doesn't always exist, and they're expected to be on all the time. And I don't think that balance just happens, right? It's just about making and taking those boundaries and making sure that like you're intentional about them and intentional about, you know, the rest that you need, right? And not glorifying this idea of like burnout, but, you know, trying to set your own pace. I think, you know, especially, you know, in New York and especially within industries that are moving fast. But I do also, you know, do think that, you know, for myself, like I've learned that balance, you know, isn't a destination, right? It's a practice. And I think the more grace that we give ourselves and each other, the better we get at, you know, creating lives that are sustainable and fulfilling, and being able to recognize when and walk away from, I think, just employers and situations and positions that aren't always willing to, I think, see that perspective and are willing to give you that grace.
So I think on this, there's that upside of being in a company that Nick was talking about, where you have that team with like potential mentors who can kind of get you over that bump, where they're like, you know, I see what's causing you trouble. I see where you're having some difficulty and getting kind of like frustrated. This is how we can talk about, like, we can talk about how this is, you might do this, how you can like make some time for this, learn some time management or whatever the hell, upskill, right? Like, I feel like I've been in situations where I've had a great team and we just cover each other's backs. So when things got rough, we're like, all right, I need your help. Like, help me write some copy for this thing. And we get it done. You know, no burnout, no beach needed, but maybe we made that time for the beach.
I think that's something too that's really missing from the small business side. They see it's because I think you see one of the things that I've seen is people that are focused on trying to either build their business or working in it. The ability to take that time aside and say, hey, let's train this person, let's bring them up, let's take whatever we can off their plate or sort of redistribute. Seems to be one of those things is a real challenge. And I think to you know, a question I would wonder to Emily is when it comes to something like finding that balance or that sort of structure, is it always a case of necessarily fighting the fire that's in front of you, or do you think it's there is a defined, you can set yourself to be able to identify what you want and here's my focus time for this?
I mean, that's a good question. So I would say for myself, it's very much, I don't like to use the word type A, right? But it's like very organized and structured, right? And so if my children were here, they'd probably roll their eyes, because it's creating that structure and those schedules and those, I would say, like a level of organization around your day, right? So being able to say, okay, so this is my time frame, and this is how I'm going to be working this out, and this is what I'm going to be doing this. And I use this example that I'm about to give is just for the mere fact that I was literally just talking about this with my husband about we're having a birthday party for my son on Saturday, and I gave like a list of like how I think it should go. And he's like, here we go. And I'm like, but look, we have this many hours for the party. This is how it should be. This is why. So I was like, you know, pitching him on, you know, my plan. But I think that goes with everything, right? So it's like, how do I want to use this time as effectively and as important as possible? And so how do I use that time throughout the day? Because I find if I don't do that, it's 2:00 and I think to myself, I got nothing done today. Right. So I think, you know, to your question, I think, yes, I think you have to be able to, you know, schedule yourself accordingly, because if not, then you're by 7:00, 8:00, you're still working, and you feel as though you're trying to catch up from what you should have done at 11 a.m.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Couldn't agree more with that comment. I think so first of all, work-life balance is defined differently in everyone. Mm-hmm. Like if you went and asked 100 people, they'd all say something different. And I said before we came on, I've wished for a long time people would just be a lot more honest with what it means for them.
Yeah.
Like I want to work less. I want to spend more time with my children, whatever it is. But with that, I think comes discipline. You have to have structure. You have to be organized. You have to be disciplined. Or you end up just producing way less than you want. You know, if I work a 20-hour week, I'm probably going to produce less than if I worked a 40-hour week. So there are accommodations that come from choices that you make on the work-life balance spectrum. If I want to spend half my working week with my daughter, playing with her, I probably won't produce as much as I would if I sat in front of my laptop the whole week. But that's cool, and that's a decision I make. So there's always that push-pull on, do I want to spend time on the beach or do I want to spend time working? And for me, that's the work-life balance question. What is it to each person?
And the push-pull thing is interesting. Hang on, you guys, I'm going to do something crazy right now. I haven't done this before, but I'm going to, special effects style, I'm going to try and change the layout while we're in the call. Check it out. Let's see. Oh, that's so much better.
Oh, yeah.
Look at that. Now it's like we can see ourselves and each other and everything. Totally conversation changer. Okay, now that the special effects are over, I'm going to read a comment that somebody left, which is what they found as a freelancer. Sorry. Definitely a great thing to have when working at a company, the team backing you up, right? And the mentorship, like you were saying, Elaine, like we're all saying. What this person found as a freelancer is that you can build your own network of mentors, which is interesting to build your own network of mentors outside. Obviously, that's takes its own work and time to develop those connections for sure. This person has a few colleagues that they can reach out to if they need help. But see, that's a good piece to throw out there for people who are considering going out on your own, is to just remember that you don't need to be on your own, and you probably shouldn't consider yourself just being on your own, right? That's just not, you're going to be giving yourself a whole host of new stresses by being alone that might not be worth the trade-off of the stress of whatever you were experiencing in your position. Because it is all give and take, right? As the old expression from, I think it was the 90s goes, like, there's no free lunch, right? You can't, like you're saying, Nick, you can't play with your daughter, go to the beach and have fun all the time and expect to also have the same outcome of productivity. So it's just realistically trying to figure that stuff out. Here's another question that came in. Does the panel feel that there are preferred industries where it might be the most advantageous being an independent contractor? Seems like IT seems to dominate in this regard. It certainly did in 2021. Let me tell you. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think, well, again, it depends what you want. If it's really sought after skill sets that are rare and hard to come by, that typically commands much higher financial reward if you go freelance or individual contributor. But again, that's, that might not be the driver for someone. It's not all about money, and that same person might want purpose and feel part of the journey. So yes, there are, but it's all dependent on what that person wants. I sound like a broken record, but that's my answer.
No, that makes sense. It's good to know. What do you guys think, the rest of you? Anything that comes to mind? Definitely not real estate, I think.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's I think there's a real sort of want for transition for people who are like, as Nick said, when you have that unique skill set, you've got something that you can bring to the table. But when you're able to articulate it well, when you're able to sort of communicate whatever it is that you do that's exceptional or different beyond the average, and I'm sure, Elaine, you've probably run into this as well. When it comes to the concept of marketing, I think the broad industry has this idea of, just do the marketing. Here's something that's going on, and you'll just take care of that, and that's that. But if you're, and to answer what is just do the marketing, there's always someone who can fill that. But if you're in a position where you can say, hey, you know what, this is the skills that I bring. So I've always tried to specialize in strategy or whatever it is that someone might do. It's being able to communicate that spin on that I think really makes sort of a more competitive edge when it comes to freelancing.
I would say, I think from a standpoint of, industry-wise, yes. I mean, Rick, you mentioned IT, so yes, I think that, and not I think, I know that is where the majority of where the talent is looking to move in a freelancing capacity, because it's ever evolving, right? So the change and the nuances that consistently are occurring within IT creates this demand for someone who actually can step up, who understands it, who has recently been trained, or who has taken a class, or who has, recently maybe worked at a company who actually is utilizing that software or that skill. It's not something where you can say, oh, I've been in retail for 15 years, I know how to do this job, right? It's, I've only worked in this area for 15 weeks, but I can do this job. And so being able to hire freelancers who, one, who are quick and nimble and who have that experience, but also who are willing to learn and can quickly jump in, it's always going to consistently be within that space of IT, because it's always changing.
There's a couple of things I'll throw out. This is a great segue. Thank you, everyone who's commenting. You're just bringing me through my talking points for me. This is amazing. I know you're not supposed to say that when it happens smoothly. I'm making it unsmooth intentionally, I guess, but I guess that's my problem. So anyway, I was looking up before that in the U.S. currently, it's approximately 36% of the workforce is freelance or self-employed. Currently, that's over 70 million people in the U.S. workforce, and they anticipate that it'll go over 90 million by 2028. Canada typically a little bit behind the U.S. in terms of work trends, and often following the trend is moving in that direction. We went in Canada from 13% freelance or like gig economy, self-employed, whatever you want to call it, workforce, to 30 this year is what the estimate is. It will be by the end of the year, but obviously we're only mid-year. That's like more than double. So the trend that we're seeing is not just in our minds. The internet seems to agree that certainly in Canada, it's been a very big shift in that direction. Part of this might be, again, the quote-unquote gig economy. It feels like people who are in Gen Z age, and I'm Canadian, so I'm going to say Gen Z. Said this on prior things. The guy who named Generation X, where's he from? Vancouver. So I think that the alphabet should go by the Canadian pronunciations. Douglas Coupland coined it. So anyway, that's my own little thing on the side. But yeah, a lot of Gen Z aged people are sort of opting out of the traditional workforce intentionally and trying, something that happens frequently in Canada is people will graduate as a teacher and say, no, I just want to be a supply teacher. I don't want to be a full-time teacher because I spend most of my time managing my Etsy store and selling products that I make. And then picking up supply work is is the stopgap. So it's flipped in their minds, where the traditional workforce options are the stopgap or the sort of like extra, and it gives them the chance to go down this. So this is possibly where the trend, that data is coming from. How are you guys feeling about that? Like, obviously in recruitment, that's a whole other conundrum that we'll have to face as this generation either decides to lean back into traditional workforce or go elsewhere. But like, how is that manifesting itself for you guys?
Do you know the split, Rick, for freelancers in company versus like individual contributors that are just setting up their own shop?
No, that's the thing. This is just like very surface level data. I'm sure that there's probably studies on that from like Ernst & Young, et cetera, but I wanted really recent data. Like, you can only get old data on that, but it feels like it's changed so much in the past 2 years in Canada, but in the past year in the US, it's skyrocketed. Personally, my theory is that part of the appeal is the shift away from remote work. I think that remote work was possible for people. There's stats all over the internet on this where like it was 35% of the workforce was fully remote during COVID, which is wild in the US. And then that went down to 1% last year, 1% from 35. So I think a lot of people are just kind of like, well, screw this, but I can do my own thing and whatever. So the desire to like, I'll do 3-4 different things and then have still not have to move back to Manhattan, for example, because now I live in wherever. I live in Connecticut or whatever, right? In Jersey. That's one reason. Or I like to travel a lot, and I was doing that, but I was working 2 weeks out of the year, out of every month in Mexico, and I want to keep doing that. So I think that's part of the impetus, but that's just a theory. I don't have any data on that one.
I'd really like to know what the split is as well, like in terms of whether this is a tech role or like a service role. Like, are we just seeing a lot of plumbers or something?
There's not enough plumbers. What do you mean? No,
honestly, there's not enough plumbers. There really isn't enough plumbers. But like, is that what it like? Or is this that whole kind of weird thing where if you work for Uber, you're technically a gig worker. You're not an employee. Like, it could be that as well.
100%. I think Uber drivers are probably in those numbers, I would assume, because I think that skews things. It's just interesting, I think, to see, like, as someone who came to staffing rather late in life, I find all this stuff super fascinating. The novelty has not left in the past 15 years of me being in staffing because I got into it in my 30s. And it's just kind of like just seeing what the trends are, I think is interesting. But I do think that it's because people are now expecting to have different kinds of flexibility and work-life balance options. That's what I think is driving it.
I think the other side of the fence from a business perspective, there's so much uncertainty in the business world generally that companies probably are reticent about growing full-time headcount. So they're looking at contract freelance options instead. Like a bunch of our clients have done exactly that in the last couple of years. Funding has dried up. They don't want to scale like they did pre or through COVID. And then the taps got turned off. So there's this real hesitation around scaling headcount, willy-nilly. And then you get yourself in real hot water. So I think the flexibility that comes from a more flexible workforce is something that owners and shareholders are choosing right now. And that may well shift, that always runs in cycles. We've seen it a bunch of times. So that could be it, or part of it.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on that? I know I just threw stats at you guys and expecting you to have opinions on them immediately, but if you do, great.
Personally, I mean, and wanting to see other stats even still, I'd be fascinated to see if there's any opinion polls on it from the workers themselves. And the reason being, just I wonder how much of it is also, have you got a group of people who are starting to look at this and say, hey, I have developed skills in X or skills in Z. I can go out and market those individually rather than go out and sell myself as the whole package and make earn more that way or have a little side hustle that way.
Or is it because people just don't have the choice?
Mm-hmm.
Really, yeah. I've recently been in previous roles been hiring marketing people, and you would get like 200 resumes for one job.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was always like that. I don't think the competition was that high. And I know so many people who have had months and months of I've applied to 500 roles and got 3 interviews, and it's just rough out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Part of the thing that I think is where this is evolving is that I think that people also, like we said before too, like having your own value, understanding your own value on the market is not something a lot of people who are used to being employees are used to doing, right? Their resumes are based on the strength of their years experience and the brand of the employers they worked for before. They're not even used to having to, or like they don't even think of articulating like, what do I individually bring to the table, unless it's just numbers, right? Like I was a good sales performer, blah, blah, blah. That, or you get people who go in the other direction, who have a million adjectives that mean nothing. You know what I mean? I'm amazing at integrity. I mean, it's like, really? You're the best at integrity? Everybody says integrity. Maybe you're the best, but we don't want to find out. Next. Like that's kind of, but as marketing people, do you feel like the need for personal branding and marketing, even just to find a job or to start your own thing, is evolving and becoming that much more necessary?
I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on Elaine, but yeah, I think in my experience, very much so. I think everything that I've seen has always been, everybody kind of wants to get a sense of who you are before they bring you into the room. And being able to have that personal brand, it used to be, you'd say you'd go out and network and make sure that you're meeting connections or, after work socials, that sort of thing. But I think in sort of a hyper information age now, being able to do the quick search on your LinkedIn, being able to do the quick search for an Instagram or anything like that really puts people on edge of having, certainly in marketing anyway, in my experience, of having to develop, here's what my brand is, here's what my identity is, here's exactly what you're getting. And I would go a step further to say, I think that there are a couple of centers within the corporate structure, but something I've observed in a couple of different places has been that for non-revenue centers in businesses, I think that's especially true because you get people who are saying, listen, I'm going in and I'm hiring a marketer, and this person might be, mid-career, that sort of thing. They're not at the top of the department. So how do I make sure that I'm paying $100,000 or whatever to go out and get something delivered from them? That they're going to be delivering me $100,001. So,
I mean, I think so. I started off in graphic design, and there's a lot of graphic designers out there, and there's also a lot of marketers out there. Like this is not a role that you need there's a lot of barriers for entry. So I think because of that like you have to stand out. So whether that's like when I was freelancing, my whole deal was I didn't advertise. I was just getting people coming to me, but because I had a good reputation of being like very reliable and very easy to work with, and that became my personal brand, and that's kind of what got me work. So that's kind of the advice I usually give people. It's like, you know, you need to find like what your niche is hey, a lot of people can do a really neat layout, or a lot of people can like put together a social media calendar, but like what is it about working with you that makes you the person people want to hire?
How just jump in there, how do you do that, guys, from a marketing perspective? Like how do you get across the threshold of people actually just listening to you? If you've got 200 other people that are sending in their resume or wanting the same thing that you want, how do you do that? How do you make yourself stand out? Or is that the $1 million question?
I'm not going to give my secrets. It's networking. It's about like, and like, I would say the conscious networking. So not just like handing out your business cards, getting to know people. It's like actually getting to know people, forming a relationship, caring about them. I feel like that's actually kind of an undersold thing about marketing, is that you have to be very empathetic. It's like really, really understand like what the problem is, what the customer's problem is. So really kind of showing that and sticking in people's brains, making them feel good so they remember you. Like I think that's kind of, you know, you use your marketing skills with people.
Well, and to add to that, I think one of the ones that I've always experienced either on the employee or the freelancer side is to, you know, you get going into an interview, going into a meeting, whatever, with that consultative approach of, listen, you've got a problem. Let's just talk about how we can solve it. And whether or not you're going in as the employee, I mean, it's you know, as a personal secret for any interview that I've been in, going in and repositioning the interview around like, okay, well, how can I help you solve your problem, has been a wonderful thing. And businesses really, in my experience, like to see that kind of ownership over whatever it is that you're doing in marketing. So being able to bring something like that, but you know, to even to bring it back to the nature of the topic today, I think that it's something that is a learned skill through, in as I've seen, through freelancing, through being able to have those sort of career breaks and say, okay, well, you know, I'm not going to necessarily be the employee right now. I'm going to figure out how to solve a business's problem and how to think about things like that. So it's So
I think kind of going back to what you had mentioned earlier, as far as like the personal branding portion of this, you know, I'm not in marketing, but I do feel like, you know, we have at any given point, we are putting ourselves out there from a standpoint of like marketing ourselves, right, and who we are. But I think for myself, I think it really clicked when I realized that it wasn't something that I had to actually create, right? And it was there. It was just about becoming intentional with it. And, you know, a few years ago, I'm juggling, you know, trying to build my career, parenting, you know, moving and living in a new environment, and that navigation, right? And making sure that I was able to pivot into a more of a strategic and client-facing position. You know, I didn't have time to actually sit there and like overthink my presence online or craft this perfect pitch or LinkedIn bio, right? But what I did have is like this clear sense of how I worked, right? And you know, what mattered to me as, you know, as a person, as a wife, as a individual, as a employee, and how I wanted the people to feel, right? Like after working with me, after interacting with me, you know, I wanted them to feel seen and supported, and like they also were able to accomplish what their goal was. And so I just started leaning into that, right? And I would show up to meetings and to client-facing interactions and make sure that I was actually just putting myself out there in a way that was going to represent who I was as a person and what I wanted to put out there, right? And I just had to realize that like your personal brand, I don't think is built on like this single post, right? Or like this, like I said, this perfectly written bio. It's built on like every interaction that we have.
For sure.
And so if I may, I'd love to ask then, so how much do you think the job market in 2025 is based on sort of, here's the baseline of when you're recruiting anyway, on the baseline of we want someone who can accomplish XYZ tasks, and how much of it, given that it's so competitive, is based on, is this person got the personality that we try and cultivate around here?
I'll hold my answer
Yes.
until you guys can.
I would say so. I mean, that becomes the $1 million question, in my opinion, right?
Mhm.
I think there's always going to be a hesitation and a concern that if I bring this, person on, are they going to be the right cultural fit? Are they going to, work in this environment? Are they going to be able to work with this, colleague of theirs? And I think regardless whether or not you're a freelance employee or even a, direct full-time of that company, there's always that concern whether how you're hiring. But I do think that the autonomy of being a freelancer gives you the chance to join an organization, be a part of it, and then feel like you have the ability and the control to say, you know what, this really isn't the right fit for me. This isn't the environment and the culture that I was looking for, and I now want to be able to move on and try something different or move to a different company. But I think having that flexibility and that control, I think allows you to step in more authentically, because you know that you're not tied down, more or less, in that position, right? Of having that a full-time, commitment of everything has to go through this company, but knowing that you have the flexibility to walk away if needed.
Interesting. Very fair.
Nick, do you want to take that one too, or?
Yeah, we've always said at RBW, the skills piece is interesting and important, but the cultural fit, the personality is key. You can be the best at what you do, but if the fit's not right, it just won't work. So for me, it's always personality, cultural fit first, and all the rest you can train and work on. But in a tough market where companies are struggling, they might look at technical skills above everything else because they need wins, they need results. So again, I think it's industry dependent. But I'd like to think it's about culture more than anything. I think that's really important. And just the last thing I will say, I think it will become more so as AI increases and people are getting tired already of bumping into AI and not having that human experience. I think the human piece is going to become more important. Face-to-face meetings, building human connection. And my concern is that the younger generation may not want to do that as much, perhaps. So I think there's certainly learning to be done there, I think, on how to build relationships in a human connection way.
Totally.
So that's curious for me. So because I'm seeing so many people using AI to craft their resumes, to try to beat the system. And so as a recruiter, how do you find the right culture fit? How do you connect client and candidate?
Emily?
Sure.
We can go over an hour, by the way.
Yeah. No, so that is, why you bring, I think, in my opinion, you have to bring in a recruiting agency, right? Because we're going to ask the questions that, I would say that most maybe shy away from, right? We're going to dig deep, what has been the biggest challenge? Why has there been all this turnover, right? So I'm being very surface level with these questions, but there has to be a thorough level of discovery with the client and then with the candidate. But to your point, as far as AI and having them write their resume, I'm sure others on this call can attest to this, but they start the position and then you realize, and the client will call you and say, so they said they could do this, but they actually can't. And so that becomes a constant challenge. And I think from working with recruiters within my organization and hearing their conversations, it's really saying, okay, but how did you use it? When? What did that look like? When you did use it, what was happening and where did it play into this, right? So we have to be asking those questions, because whether or not they think that AI is taking that over, they still can't take that human component out of it, as far as being able to quickly, one, answer those questions, and two, use this in real life scenarios and situations that are going to, I would say, reflect or even become beneficial for the client that they're interviewing with.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think AI gives you potential for foundational work to be done on your behalf, but ultimately, my view is people run businesses based upon how they view the world. Like owners and shareholders and leadership run businesses based on what they think the world should be. And, you know, some people think you should work 50-hour weeks. Some people think you should work 20-hour weeks. And being able to get to that information when you're talking to a client and then match it with a candidate is the most important part. Because if you view the world differently, it will never work long term. And as of yet, I don't think AI can do that.
AI also can't talk to somebody who is an account director randomly at an ad agency and befriend them in a couple of conversations and suggest that they should try staffing because I think it's going to be a good idea, and then have a 5, 6, 7 year career success in staffing, right? So I like curveballs. I like finding somebody and suggesting, because I get to do that because I'm in a peer related network. You know what I mean? You can't do that in every kind of staffing company. But just an example, like going for big curveballs, because the AI is going to be programmed by either the agency that's using it or the employer to look for something specific. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's the argument of if you're only dating people on dating apps, right? You're putting in the criteria that you're looking for, but you're taking away the possibility for you to be surprised. You know, psychotherapists argue that the person you fall in love with is not the one who checks all the boxes. It's the one who doesn't check one box and almost irks you a little bit, but that's who you fall in love with. That's a generally accepted thing in the psychotherapy community the world over. You're never going to find that person if you're always trying to check all the boxes. Same thing with recruitment. Right, same thing.
Rick, where were you 10 years ago when I was on the dating team? That'd have been great as well.
Yeah, for sure. Seriously, I don't know how anybody stays on the dating apps for very long. It's a weird thing. That's a whole other podcast, though. We'll stick on that. But I just answered the question before too, in my own opinion, Jonathan, about trends. I feel like the trend is going fully in the wrong direction, but probably because the market is so hard, where I feel like people want everything. They want someone who checks all the boxes. They don't want them to only fit the culture. They want them to define the culture. They want them to be the Uber example of the culture. They don't want them to have good numbers. They want them to have perfect numbers, impeccable numbers, and the greatest culture fit ever. And they just won't hire for 6 months, 12 months. Their business will go into the ground until they find that person, because they're so terrified of getting it wrong and the consequences of getting it wrong. And I don't think it'll last, but that's where things are trending, unfortunately, in what I've seen, which is you know, temporary, I think.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that too, because in real estate, there's certainly a saying that we always observe that, you know, in a hot market, people want 8 out of 10 on their checklist. Sorry, in a hot market, people want 8 out of 10 on their checklist, and in a slow market, people want 12 out of 10. And I think there's a real trend that's a real truth on that. That when it comes to mass availability, people are going to set the bar much higher, and it becomes, you know, a real hurdle to jump. But I'd be fascinated to know, looking back to the stats, I'd be fascinated to know, is there a real trend as that has ebbed and flowed over the years, or I wonder if it stayed the same.
I mean, I think it really does depend. But I also want to sort of curve that into sort of my last talking points, where we're probably going to go slightly over time here. But I mean, to me, I feel like this would be helped by, like, AI is just exposing, in my opinion, the fact that the hiring process has been kind of broken, right? Like, resumes have been stupid for how many years? Everybody does them in Word. People get, you know, you get coaching on them or whatever else. What does a resume really tell? How can you trust just a resume? I think that having a recruiter, like you were saying, Emily, get behind the resume to find out more about the person and what they're struggling with is super necessary. But even just asking the same HR questions that you've been able to look up on Google the answers to for 20 years now isn't, you know, so like doing it paint by numbers on both sides of the fence has been broken for a long time. And that's getting exposed because, yeah, AI can do that, right? It can do those things. Those things are not good practices, though. So yeah, if you're doing it poorly, you will be replaced by AI, and shame on you. And you should have been replaced by AI a long time ago. Like, where was AI not replacing you years ago, you know? But and I know it's maybe a harsh sounding opinion, but I think that the human element, it's an opportunity for both sides to actually evidence who they are a little bit more, like you're saying, Nick, in that perfect world of where people are just a little bit more open and upfront. And you can see at the top what the employer's ethos is and view of the world is, and that people can actually feel comfortable enough to be themselves and see if there's a genuine match there, and not have this cynicism and all these games in between it. And that'll help with personal branding. And I also think, I don't know how you guys feel about this, that I think that the desire for work-life balance is a desire to have more time to be yourself, right? I think that's what people are really saying underlying. But I think that that's the sad truth is a lot of people feel like they can't be themselves at work. So wanting more work-life balance is feeling stifled, I think, and anxious about not having space to be yourself and having to put on this mask. If people could be themselves more at work, I think, you know, like when I was working a day job that I didn't love, but then running my record label at night and all this other stuff, I had limitless energy to do the music stuff. But I couldn't stand, I was like, oh my God, when's my break at my day job? Because I wasn't being myself, right? So it's a whole different energy. Doing something where you feel like you can be yourself and you're invested emotionally, you feel like you have impact and all this kind of stuff, it gives you energy. It doesn't take energy away. You want to complete projects. You're not like, oh my God, I need to avoid them and go to the beach to avoid it. But like, there's a core thing there that's a lot more important even maybe than the number of hours that people are working.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I had a job years ago and I stayed in it for too long, but I was someone else there and I hated it and I was miserable and I was going through depression and it was bad. It was bad all the time. And then I found a new job where the people were amazing. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to be myself no matter what. I'm going to be the weirdest person that I am. And I just had the best time. Like we cultivate this amazing environment, this community within ourselves where like we were helping each other out. And we just had, like, I'm still friends with these people. We hang out all the time. You know, it was the best time. Like it can be the crappiest job ever, but if you are having a good time, it's the best job ever.
Yep. Agreed.
I think that you also have to be honest about what really motivates you. And I think if you're not, then you're going to find yourself in situations where you're never feeling fulfilled. Right. And so, and I think someone who's really motivated by money sometimes will shy with that and say, oh, I want to have this, or I'm motivated by having a good team around me. But it's like, okay, but then that's not going to pay your bills because you're motivated by money. So what's the real reason for taking this job, right? So I think that once you can be honest and true about, look, I am motivated by this, and this is what gets me up in the morning. I don't care if the team is great or not, right? That maybe they're kind of, not the best, but I'm making a lot of money. Or, I'm motivated by making impactful work and helping my community and doing things like that. And you are working for a company that doesn't care about that. So I think it's just about making sure that you're being honest with yourself and seeking out opportunities that align with that.
Yeah, my version of what Elaine just said is just purpose. Find out what your purpose is. If your purpose is home life and children, find a job that allows you to have that. If your purpose is earning all the money, find a job that gives you that. But until you know what your purpose is, you'll struggle to find exactly what it is you want, whether that's freelance or permanent or whatever it is. That's the thing you need to find out. And just harking back to something we talked about earlier, speaking to people about that, mentors, colleagues, psychologists, get people to help you uncover what that answer is. And the quicker you get it, the quicker it will be happy times in work.
Yeah, and I'd just throw in even one further piece. I've always found, regardless of the role, there's always going to be an element of eating your vegetables. It's just a matter of being comfortable with how many vegetables you have to eat, really.
Very well said. I've never heard that before. I like that a lot.
And by that, you mean things you love to do, like eat vegetables, right?
Exactly.
Vegetables are amazing, and we all love them. Okay. Just checking.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. We're slightly over time, but this was amazing. I really appreciate all of your perspectives as usual, and I hope you all had a great time.
Yeah, loved it. Thanks for the invite, Rick.
Thank you very much.
And see us all. Come see us every Wednesday at noon EST, and also anywhere that you get your podcasts. In fact, if you try to find it somewhere that has podcasts and you cannot find this, do message me because that's not supposed to be a thing. Thank you all and see you next Wednesday.